All right, guys, welcome to the Hunter's Quest podcast. This is your host, Hunter McWaters, and today I'm here with an old friend of mine I haven't seen in a while, David Zock. How you doing, man?
It's good to see you again.
Yeah, you too, man. It's been a while. We were just kind of catching up before we started rolling here. But David is, I guess, the founder of a band called Remedy Drive, or a founding member, I guess.
Yeah.
And a musician, and you're pretty much full time doing. I mean, you are full time doing music for how long now?
For 20 years,
Wow,
ever since college.
dang.
Um, uh, Although I roofed my house this year, a few weeks.
That's a legit job. You roof the whole thing.
Yeah, with my son and my daughter helped a little bit too.
Okay.
We're talking about even doing the plywood. But that's what we did before we went full time with the band about 20 years ago. We were roofing houses
Oh, okay.
together. Um,
Gotcha.
and that's when I counted. I was like, yeah, it's been 20 years now.
Wow. So you've been able to scrape out a living in the music industry for 20 years. That's legit, man. It's not easy.
It's like a double-edged sword because it's kind of like I kind of want to boast about it. Like I've made a living for 20 years, and I was like, man, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I'm not a household name. But I'm just thankful to be making music and doing what I love.
No,
Um,
I think
that-
doing what you like you said, I think just doing what you love and like I kind of put my toe in the water in the music industry for like a couple years when I got out of college and just knowing firsthand a little bit of how tough it is to make a living in the music industry. I mean, I say hats off to you, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great. So, are you guys still you guys are still like touring and recording albums and stuff like that? Like tell me a little bit about what you guys are up to as a band.
So we've put out in the last decade 3 indie albums, and I'm recording the fourth right now. And honestly, just playing enough shows to keep to make the ends meet. My son has his senior year of football this fall, so I was telling him it's the first time ever in 20 years that I've slated off 3 months of Friday nights because that's prime real estate right now.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, no, I'm not. I'm not taking any concerts on these Fridays here. But I'm gearing up for 24 to be playing some more shows.
Okay.
I'm really excited about. I'm learning some new techniques with producing and mixing. Um, Even some of these old guys, because usually with mixing, historically, you've needed all this real gear,
Yeah.
uh, and some the simulation of that real gear has gotten to a high quality. So even some of these old school guys are using the modelers rather than the physical gear. So I'm learning how to use some of those models
Nice.
to mix our music too, which has been a fun thing to learn.
Yeah. And you live in like Franklin, Tennessee, or do you live in Nashville?
Yeah, just between the two in a place
Okay.
called Brentwood. I am in, but not of the suburbs, and I feel that it's very apparent every day.
Oh man, did you oh, that's another rabbit hole. Did you see that video of the Bigfoot sighting in Baxter, Tennessee that just recently dropped out?
No, you're going deep right away, but I'll have to check that out.
There's like a legit Bigfoot video that someone took in Baxter, Tennessee, right in your neck of the woods that like came out recently.
Was it accidental or were they going? Were they
No,
going?
they saw it. It was in their backyard, and they took a video. And like you see this thing, it reaches out its arms like this, and it's like 7, 8 foot long arms.
Oh.
It's like black. It's crazy.
The difficulty when you're looking for Bigfoot is he has long range telepathy, which makes it easy. To do that. But
Okay, so you familiar with the Squatch, huh?
I've done some research. Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think about him?
Is he a species? Are they a species that landed here on the way to some other prison planet and crash landed here and have been living subterraneously ever since? I don't know. Are they remnants of the Nephilim interbreeding program between humans and fallen angels? I'm not sure. My options open.
Dude, Okay, we got okay. Now I got a whole nother list of topics we can go into.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, I just had to bring it up because it just happened right near your neck of the road, so or neck of the woods. So maybe we can jump into some of that stuff later. But there's a few other things I want to hit with you too. But just for the audience, I know a little bit about your backstory, but just to give people some context a little bit, just maybe introduce yourself a little bit, kind of tell us a little bit about your backstory and how you kind of got to where you are now, and kind of what you're doing on top of the music stuff.
So I started Remedy Drive with my brothers, different of them in high school and then into college, and wanted to stay independent because we wanted to be original and kind of were a jam band early on, fashioned ourselves like Dave Matthews and Fish, but also loving Pearl Jam and Chili Peppers and Smashing Pumpkins and but also Keith Green, the
Mm-hmm.
guy that kind of started Christian music back in the day on the piano. So those are my influences. And we stayed indie for a long time. But then we signed with Word Records, which was on Warner Brothers in '08, and had a couple songs that put us on the map and put us into people's houses and radios and cars and kitchens. And I'm really thankful for that time period. But I spent a few years in the music industry. After we were touring 200 dates a year, 150 dates a year, just to
Mm.
make a living, and I'm so grateful for that because it really amplified our name and our songs into people's homes, and people started listening, and a lot of those people are still with us today. But it was difficult because in around 2012, 2013, I realized that there's only a certain number of songs that we're able to write in that particular industry, only a certain number of ideas that can make it through.
Mm.
And they were very much uninterested with my idea of writing a concept album on boy soldiers, on child trafficking, on slavery, on injustice, and on justice as well, social justice, but social causes. Um, and I remember my A&R guy saying around that time, but hey, isn't worshipful music about singing and all this other stuff and I very disillusioned by it. Uh,
Right.
and my marketing director, really successful guy, but saying to me, David, I'm a whore and I need you to give me something I can sell. So it was really, yeah, knowing
Gross.
what I was like writing about. And I was like, I'm not. So I wrote this song, I'm a soul inside a body. I'm not a commodity.
Mm.
And taking the angst that I had towards an industry that tries to own me and shrink wrap me and reduce my thoughts and my songs and my rhymes to the lowest common denominator, but then using that angst to represent the cause of people that are still being enslaved,
Mm.
trafficked, and taken advantage of in 2012, 2013. And the fun part of the story was in 2013, a guy was he ran a charity. Well, he was a youth worker way back in '08, and he heard my song all along on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, there was a tragedy in his youth group, and he listened to that song on repeat on the way to comfort some of the kids in the youth group. And so he knew me, but I didn't know him. That's '08. 2013, he messages us and says, hey, can I meet you? I'm doing some work fighting against human trafficking. Would love to talk. And we talked, and here's a guy that's my age, has 3 kids just like I do. And he learned how to spy on criminal networks that are selling girls for sex overseas. And he invited me to talk about the work and raise money for him. I said, I don't want to just talk about it. You got to take me with you. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where it started for us. And then for the last 10 years, I've been working alongside his organization, the Exodus Road. His wife Laura is the CEO, and she's running things. Laura Parker and Matt Parker, and then we've written 3 albums about trafficking, about hope, about justice, and so we've had a trilogy of counter trafficking themed albums.
Mm. And the first one was North Star, right?
First one was Commodity,
Okay. Second
and
one
the
was North Star.
second one was North Star, titled after Frederick Douglass's newspaper of the
Nice.
same name,
Nice, man.
representing a star that runaway slaves would sing this drinking gourd song that would help them find and remember how to find the North Star in the night sky to run north.
Okay. That's a great album. I still have that in my, it still pops up my playlist from time to time. And my son loves Sunshine on Her Face. And,
Oh yeah,
or is that what it's called? Sunshine?
Sunlight. Yeah,
Yeah. Sorry. But yeah, great album. Um, so I do want to definitely dive into your work with Exodus Road and trafficking and all that, and talk about how we went together and did some of that stuff. But
yeah.
I want to ask you a little bit about the music industry because um, I know that you're sort of like in the Christian music world, which may be somewhat insulated from the stuff, but I don't know. I think, but anyway, it's a in general. Since you've been in the music industry for 20 years, you
Yeah.
no doubt know people and know things and have seen. It's like a seedy, sketchy business for the most part. Like I said, maybe Christian music is a little different, but um, I don't know. What's your take on that? Yeah, I don't know.
Um,
Is that too broad of a question?
no, and I don't. No, I know. I mean, we already talked about Bigfoot, so I'm well versed in the theories and the concerns and the accusations. If you looked us up, you and I didn't talk about this, you will find out that our album cover for Commodity, um, a lot of flat earthers in like 2017, an astronaut posted a picture of our album cover and the same photo that we used. We thought it was a bullet hole because the lyric was, "I need a band-aid. I don't need a band-aid for my bullet hole."
Hmm.
And what it was actually a hole in the ISS from way back in the day. And so it was a free use picture that
Oh,
we
okay,
for
gotcha.
a montage music video with a ton of great, and it really stuck out to us. So this astronaut posted that there was a current hole in the ISS, and he posted that picture to show what it would look like. And all the people that don't believe that space is real and that NASA only lies really jumped on the bandwagon and said, "Hey, they're just," and I'm telling this whole story to set up my answer for you.
Yeah.
They're saying like, "Look, it's just a psyop. They're just trying to trick us again. They're just being so blatant about their lies. Obviously, this band is in on it, or they're just using this band." And so people thought that I had sold my soul and so it was really fun to be on the other side of the suspicion,
Yeah.
know that it's completely baloney. It was a random coincidence that we happened to use this photo and that that this astronaut posted this photo. But I went on like flat Earth podcasts. I went on like all sorts of podcasts at that time and said, "I'm sorry, I have a lot of questions too, but this is not the smoking gun you hope for."
Right.
And with also the lyric from Red Hot Chili Peppers, space might be the final frontier, but it was made in a Hollywood basement,
Yeah.
and all those questions, and then you bring in all the craziness about and with sex trafficking also there is a lot of craziness out there with what people believe
Yeah.
with Wayfair furniture and just all this, and somehow it's always conveniently partisan or elite based, and they can blame a certain party, they can blame elites, they can blame people that are different than them, they don't understand, and say that's what's going on, and that's what sex trafficking is, or that's what Hollywood is, or that's what the music industry is, and everybody in it sold their soul to the devil in order to be successful. That's kind of baloney. I
Mm.
mean, that's insane. And I tell that whole story that I just told um, to point that out. Is there weird stuff happening? I think so. Because you think of Chester Bennington, you think of the head of Soundgarden. I forgot his name, the lead singer of Soundgarden.
I don't remember.
Both of them dying um, in odd circumstances and researching some weird things going on in Hollywood. They were both part of a non-government organization trying to pinpoint some of the weird stuff that we're talking about here. So it's not to say there's not really bad actors in any industry.
For sure.
And so for me, when you ask about the music industry in general, you're going to find out soon about one particular Christian organization, not just a band, but a company that they're involved in that is one of the most corrupt, dirtiest, most awful organizations you've ever heard of, doing the most awful things and then parading around partnering with evangelists that know that there's something corrupt, partnering with festival owners and label owners and booking agents and management, a whole bunch of people covering up for a really gross situation that really implicates the whole Christian music industry.
Mm.
Everybody knows about this thing. It'll come out hopefully this year or next year, but it has to come out in the right way because everybody's going to say, "Oh, it's just another attack." But there's just like any industry, there's really corrupt people, and
Well,
there's
you're
people.
just gonna leave that cliffhanger bomb right
I,
there?
wouldn't you love for me to break it on your podcast?
Dude, come on.
No, I mean it's so dirty that I mean people are afraid to talk. People are afraid to put themselves at risk because it's a powerful individuals that are litigious and have a lot to protect
Hmm.
and have protected. And so I don't I don't like to think that the music industry in itself is particularly corrupt. I think everything has the
For
potential.
sure. And I wasn't trying to say that like every single musician is evil and they're all like Satanists and stuff like that. Because I'm not that naive to think everything's black and white. But at the same time, I do feel like there is kind of an anti-God agenda behind a lot of music. Not all music, but and some people are just musicians and they're normal people. But um, I feel like there definitely is like some agenda behind some stuff. Um, I mean, some of the symbolism you see in some of these big acts, I don't know. It's definitely, I feel like it's there. Not
Yeah,
saying like everybody's sold their soul, but probably some people have.
I bet some people have, man, and whatever that means, I'm not sure what that means. Does that I don't think that people are given a certain amount of talent or not, but I know there's weird people. There's weird people, and there's weird people in all facets of life, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of weird people that are artistic, you know. I mean, people were coming at Toby Mac for that one Eye on It tour because they were saying it was an Illuminati.
Oh, like eye on it, yeah.
And that's what was so funny about being on my side of it with my album cover, just how
Right,
sure people were that I was this thing. And
right.
so I answered your question with that caution, because I've heard it about everybody, and I've heard it about really good, decent people. People love to attack. Um, I mean, that idea that people are only successful or can only be successful if they've like joined some occult thing is odd to me. But
Yeah,
I do think that the occult is real, and there's people that are really involved in occult stuff, and then I think there's stuff that looks like it, and then
right.
any symbol, I don't allow symbols to be taken by the dark side. I grew up not celebrating Christmas because Christmas has all these really dark and occultish.
Yeah, like pagan stuff or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
any
said like Happy Easter on this one podcast I did with this guy Timothy Alberino, and like people were like Easter is a cult. Da, 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 da. I'm like, okay,
yeah,
maybe it is based on an occult, but everyone knows what I'm talking about is the resurrection of Jesus right now.
right.
Like, give me a break. And this, the thing that's weird about it is this kind of stuff. I feel like I said, there is truth in it. There's also people that go too far in it, and it attracts people like me, but also attracts like people who maybe are a little off their rocker too. So like you
Yeah,
have like those people that like kind of, I don't know. I don't want
and
to say give the whole thing a bad name, but
well, I mean, I think here's the sad part for me. I am more versed in conspiratorial stuff than anybody you'll meet. Like my my imagine signing on, some kid somewhere in some part of the world signed on to play Rocket League with me and ended up playing against me and my son. And my son's like Jackie Big Dog something something, and I'm Nephilim Star Ape. And this kid, whoever he was, his name was Anunnaki something. And so just the coincidence. So I've studied ancient Sumerian texts. I'm really into it. Like I love it, and it's always been something that is intriguing to me and has no bearing on the way I live my life, none whatsoever. Right?
hmm
And I fight against human trafficking and sex trafficking. But then when a ton of people had a ton of time in 2020, the whole thing got really gross and really disappointing. And what was kind of a treasured, fun part of my life was marred by just crazies coming out and saying crazy things. And really, it changed the way a lot of people live, conspiratorial things.
Mm.
And therefore, it became not as fun. And it also became, I think, less. I think as a person with any sort of influence, I had to take a big step back to even jokingly talk about, Sasquatch, um, to be like, man, I don't want to nudge somebody down a path because I think this one flat Earth podcaster, I think he might have lost his marriage because it was like a deal breaker for him that his wife become a flat earther
Oh my gosh.
on biblical grounds. Like he got
Wow.
on the podcast and said the Bible says flat Earth, which it does very clearly. Bible says young Earth too, but I'm not necessarily adhering to either of those things. Um, it's just that opens a whole can of worms for you. But
Dude, I think I remember like when I first met you, like I had dinner at your house and I think you might have like mentioned some of this stuff, but I like wasn't even like even there yet. And I was like, okay, whatever. But now it's like coming full circle. I'm asking you about all this stuff.
yeah, and so for me, there's this gradual thing. Went to a UFO seminar when I was in 11th grade,
Yeah.
and I've been studying it, looking at it. My dad was a little bit into it, but recognized that there is a danger with it, like warping, warping your mind.
Mm-hmm.
But I come to the conclusion because people say people that are conspiratorially minded will say that the UN's bad, government's always bad, um, Hollywood's bad. But I know people in Hollywood. I know people at the UN. I know law enforcement agencies, and there's good-hearted people working hard, and
Mm-hmm.
there's corruption. And as someone that's a person of faith, my real focus on corruption is the corruption that I can deal with.
Yeah.
And I have found that there is um, a massive plank in the eye of any evangelical Christian in the United States that is pointing out corruption, and they're not looking at their own church building,
Mm-hmm.
the way money's spent, at their own network of churches, their own denominations, whether it's the Southern Baptist Church or the Catholic Church or and the abuse that's being covered up and swept under the rug in so many ways.
Mm.
So I don't take anyone seriously that's pointing the finger at Hollywood or pointing the finger at the Democratic Party without pointing the finger at their own denomination and saying, what are we doing? How are we listening to women that are saying these stories are happening? Camp Cook, the Christian camp where they covered up the abuse of so many boys for so many years and put the families in non-disclosure agreements. That stuff really bugs me. And let's
Mm.
start there. Let's clean our house before we start pointing the finger at everybody else. That's the way I see
Yeah.
it.
No, absolutely, man. Yeah, you definitely can you can go down that road too far and you start, thinking every single thing you see is a psyop and,
Yeah.
and like you said, there are really good people like, in like these arenas. Um, I think there's also like different levels of, you know, government and stuff or organizations where like, my great uncle was like a very high level mason, but like the best dude, like one of my like role models and like an awesome guy, Christian guy. But at the same time, like, are the Masons at some level involved in some bad stuff? I don't know, maybe, but doesn't mean every single person who's in that is like evil or I don't know. It's like
There's
there's
people
levels.
there's people hearing you that it will sound to them like being like, oh yeah, I know somebody in the Illuminati, and it's like, are all the
I know, yeah.
for some people just to mention Mason.
Yeah. And he was just a totally normal, like blue collar dude. My Uncle Jim. Like I got a picture of him back here. He like started me off hunting and stuff.
Yeah.
And he told me before he died, he's like, go to this place and ask about the 33rd Scottish Rite Masons. And I never did it, but I don't know.
And then
Um,
there's people that are like 33rd parallel, Roswell on the other side of Mount Horrible, the angels fell, and the 33-degree Masons in the Apollo flight to the moon.
yeah.
And so for some people, even because I was that way for a while, where I thought, well, if you're a Mason, then they're part of some sort of like deep state cover up and hiding the truth from the entire planet. And I realized, man, I got to be careful. I'm not gonna. I don't want to. I don't want to live my life just suspicious of people. I want to live hopeful.
Yeah.
Also, knowing that there's evil people doing evil things. Um, because it is more fun or to think of the world as a big psyop, like you're saying, is everything's a psyop and everybody in certain industries are bad. I have a don't I have lyric about the industrial military complex and the pharmaceutical industry, and yet I know people in the military industrial complex that are great people trying to
Yeah.
change the world.
Yeah.
And in the pharmaceutical industry that are great people.
Yeah.
My wife's brother, he works in the fire, and he's worked hard on. My wife has eczema, and we're so thankful for the recent improvements
Yeah.
in that. And yet, I wish there was something else I could take other than Advil for my migraine.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be careful with broad strokes and anything, but do you know my friend Nate Henry?
Where would I know him? I know a lot of.
He was a touring musician. Now he hosts the Blurry Creatures podcast, and they live in Franklin.
I haven't met him.
Oh, dude, you would love him. Have you heard that podcast?
No, what's it about? Blurry creatures?
Oh, it's all, dude. Are you kidding me right now? You're
About
gonna love it when you find this thing. It's all about all that weird stuff that we've
okay.
just been talking about. But they're Christians and they live in Franklin, Tennessee, and it's all through like a biblical worldview. I just had them on my podcast too. And what was the band he was with? Good Charlotte.
Oh, really?
I
They're
think that's wait. I may have said the wrong band. I can't remember, but he was in. I have to look it up now, so I don't
I
like
think
misquote it.
bands are more knowledgeable about this stuff because we have more time to drive together at night
Yeah,
and talk and listen to podcasts and
Sherwood. Sorry, not Good Charlotte. He
okay,
was in the
cool.
band Sherwood.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
think about it, like Stone Temple Pilots, what's that name mean?
yeah.
That means the gray aliens or whoever was on the pilots of the spaceships that landed on the Stone Temple. Same with like Foo Fighters.
Mm.
Foo Fighters were UFOs in World War II that a lot of fighter jets were wondering
Well,
about.
since you segued into it, what do you think about this alien disclosure stuff?
Um, I, I I've always hoped that they would be really open about it, but it just seems so consistent now that people aren't even. It's odd to me that people don't really care, and
Yeah, no, it's like, oh yeah, there's aliens. Okay.
people think it's just goofy. Like I don't, I'm not saying there's aliens, even though I believe that there's so many habitable planets in the universe. But there's something odd with the UFO phenomenon, and with it, and as Hillary and Bill called it the UAP, which means they're paying attention on
Hmm.
a area phenomenon that Obama's chief of staff, Podesta, or whatever he worked, he said his biggest regret with the Obama administration was they didn't. He thought that it would be the administration to disclose to the American public what's going on with the UAP. Um, it's
There was that whistleblower that came out like a week or so ago talking about how we have craft and bodies like recovered in possession. And he was like, he worked for the ARRO office and like very good credentials.
yeah, yeah. I mean, ever since the beginning, there's Edgar Mitchell. There's
Bob Lazar.
well, Edward Mitchell has a certain degree of credibility. Bob Lazar does not have that credibility for whatever reason. But
Yeah.
yeah, as Bob says, I'm talking about like high ups. Like there's a former defense minister from Britain. There's a defense minister from Canada. And all there's so many people that are saying something's going on, and different people say different things. And I'm just fascinated by it because I'm like, what is really going on? There's
Yeah.
talking about seven stories underground and in the desert of military bases, um,
The deep underground military bases.
deep underground. And if you ask my kids would say what I truly hypothesize is there's some connection to an intense study of the transfer of consciousness.
Wait, say that again?
If I had to, if then I can't believe I'm saying that this was my guitar player's cue to leave stage if I ever talked about this stuff publicly. I would just slowly put my guitar down and go get an Uber home if I ever talked about this stuff publicly. But no, I think if someone was really like, what do you really think is going on? I think that consciousness transfer or soul transfer would be the end game. And so any experiments that happen, especially uh, and and especially with the rise in technologies that would give us digital immortality and maybe even
Mm.
being able to
So like transhumanism.
exactly. I think transhumanism is the end game of the UFO phenomenon, whatever it is. Um,
Well, that's the end game of that's probably the end game completely of the enemy because once we give up our humanity, we're no longer like eligible for dominion on earth.
or this, um, the mercy of the creator stepping in uh, at Babel, at in the Garden of Eden. Whenever "don't you know," says the enemy, the enemy, the serpent race, whatever it
Mhm.
was, don't you know that you can be like God? And so, for us to achieve God likeness or immortality apart from redemption,
Mm.
which I think the destination for our race would be we would create hell that way. We'd create
Yeah.
our
It's like it says in Revelation like they're begging for death but it won't come.
own. And if that happens in our lifetime, like I think our children have a lot of difficult ethical decisions to make. I think that a microchip would be incredibly practical in so many ways. Like I love the idea,
In your
but
brain?
yeah, well, it's for tracking. I'd love to be able to track my kids all the time.
Oh, dude.
I'm just saying it would be incredibly practical. I
Yeah, I mean, in
I
some
don't
ways, yeah.
I don't want it though. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so in many ways, the Amish are really right on the money. They just started a little bit too early. And the question for our children's generation is, what is the line? What are you willing to, where are you willing to what are you willing to do for the sake of, like, is digital, Google Glass, is that cool? What about
Yeah.
Google Contact? And if you're going to do Google Contact, why not a Google implant?
Yeah.
Like, and it's a slippery slope. Um, and I love technology. I love spy gear too. I love a Google Contact. Um,
That'd be good for your line of work.
but where do you draw the line with technology? I think is a great. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're describing the plot of such and such a movie." I'm like, no, this stuff they're taking it from us. Operation Paperclip and all the comic book stuff. That's a real operation.
Mm.
Like when the Nazi scientists went to NASA and von Braun, the SS Nazi, takes us to the moon with
Yeah.
his science. That's real. And what other sciences did we benefit from because of all the unethical and really dark occult
Oh, yeah.
inspired that the Nazis did?
And all the names of like the lunar missions were all like, Apollo and all these, ancient gods.
You know,
And you had the first Apollo mission that was supposed to go to the moon that burned up on the tarmac. Anyway, um,
man, I did not realize this was going to be such a. I thought, all right, how are we going to talk about hunting together? I've shot at some pheasants, but I've never hit. It's turned into
well,
a
we're going
great.
to talk about hunting evil.
Okay, good, good. I like that.
Well, okay. Maybe we should shift focus now from, away from all the aliens and conspiracy and Nephilim and stuff. But it's all interrelated. It's all kind of very weird. I think you're very wise and you bring some balance into it, which is very needed because, like you said, people can go way off, and I've had to like kind of tell myself like, whoa, okay, relax. Like you can't go too far down this rabbit hole
Yeah,
because you can. It's just like if you sit there and you listen to like podcasts and TV shows about serial killers like all day every day for
yes.
like weeks, you're gonna start looking at everybody like, oh, they're a serial killer, So like if you just focus too much on this stuff, it's not good. But at the same time, um, you should be aware of what's going on and look into it. But you gotta have balance, just like anything in life. So you know,
And with your segue into my work fighting injustice, um, looking at darkness intently, um, I don't mind doing it. It's important to do as long as you don't get the feeling like, oh, now I got to fix all of it.
mm,
My response to it is I will do a little bit,
mm-hmm,
because that's what I have the ability to do. And part of the way that I'm going to combat this evil is by being lazy and goofy and fun, like just having fun downtime with my kids and
Mm,
celebrating our life together in the face of evil, is also important to do, you know?
for
Um,
sure.
and that's what I'm in the middle of right now, just traveling around, visiting relatives with my family, even though I was just on the streets facing evil face to face a week ago, you know?
Mm. Yeah, that's so good, man. All right, so segue into that. So I'll just give my listeners a little. I don't know if I've ever even told this story, but to give my listeners kind of some context of how we connected and stuff. When I was working for the 700 Club, um, I think actually your publicist or somebody that works with you reached out to my boss and was kind of like, "Hey,
Yeah.
this is a cool story." And my boss mentioned to me, I was like, "Yes, I want to do that." And so what you do, and I forgive me if I'm butchering it, but I'm just going to kind of give the summary version, and then you can tell more detail, and we'll talk about it. But um, basically, you've partnered with this organization called the Exodus Road,
Yeah.
um, which their mission is to fight modern day slavery, which takes the many forms of, it could be labor, labor slavery, like on these fishing boats you hear about in the South Pacific, or in these like brick factories in India. But a lot of it is human trafficking and sex slavery in Southeast Asia and other places. And so that's something that you've kind of stepped into, and I'll let you kind of talk more about it because I know there's some confidentiality stuff. But basically, we did a story on the 700 Club about it, and I actually went to Thailand and we met up and
Yeah.
we went together undercover into some of these, I don't know, I guess you call them bars slash brothels. And we were in Phnom Penh actually at
Yeah.
that time. And I was wearing a hidden camera and filming some of the stuff. And that's similar to some of the stuff you do. Um, I was doing it to do this story, and it was very eye opening, very wild experience. And I remember at one point, I don't know if you remember this, but I had my I had a camera that was a button on one of my shirts,
Yeah.
and then I had like a little receiver in my pocket, and I was wearing shorts, and like this girl came up and was all like trying to get on me and stuff, and like she looked down and there's a wire coming out of my shorts, and she's like, "What's that?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, excuse me." And I went to the bathroom and like fixed it, and then we kind of like got out of there. But anyway, it was a wild experience, and I'm laughing because it was, looking back, it's funny, but it's not a funny situation. These ladies, these young ladies, are in horrible situations. They're usually there a lot of times because their families maybe were in debt and kind of sold them, or they're lied to. And many times underage women end up in these bars where they're sold. It's very sad. I had some other really heartbreaking conversations with some girls, and you have dedicated a lot of energy and time to working with the local authorities and this organization to find underage women that may need help and then reporting back. So that's kind of the overview, but I want to hear kind of from your mouth sort of what that work is like.
Yeah, we were in Cambodia, actually, Phnom Penh, Cambodia. And the night that we were together, was more about telling the story.
Yeah.
And I loved that you got to see firsthand what it's like, because a lot of people are like, man, how do you even operate in that scenario? And it is a really hard scenario to operate in. But one of my favorite things about those bars in Cambodia, because a lot of times if someone doesn't know the language, there's not a lot of talk about, and then there's a lot of pressure to move the the initial hello, how are you? Let's have a drink together, and then it's like let's go upstairs. Like that, there's really nothing else to talk about.
Yeah.
But there, if you remember, at some of the establishments, you were able to play Connect Four
Yeah, they had little games and stuff.
and talk, and I think that a lot of times if there's debt bondage, some of the girls are making a little bit of money maybe off that drink sale when you buy them a drink, and it's hard to tell whether or not that girl is a minor or if she's of age, and even if she is a minor, she might have a fake ID. It's hard to get a case against an establishment that's
Mm,
selling minors. unless you can prove that there's multiple ones and that they're more like 15 and 14, not so much 16, 17. And it's hard to guesstimate a girl's age in countries that I'm not from, especially
Yeah.
in age. It's hard to, a girl might be 20 but looks 15. A girl might be 15 but looks 25. Um, and so we have to be in there. We have to be in these places because no one else is in these places. There's only a few non-government organizations that are involved in intervening in human trafficking right now, and specifically the sex trafficking of minors. Um, and so what it looks like is kind of like what it looked like for us. I'm more careful than you were with my camera.
Yeah. Well, I
uh,
was like going kind of on my own because,
yeah,
the organization that you work with wasn't able to like say, okay, yeah, go for
yeah, we
it.
can sanction you to go out with
Right.
us.
So I basically went on one of these like spy websites and like bought my own hidden camera and just like, I'm doing this against some people's advice. But I just, yeah,
Yeah, and there's other reasons why people would record in those establishments,
sure.
obviously, but you still risk getting beat up. And my biggest concern would be if I get caught is ruining an ongoing investigation. Because
Hmm.
sometimes there's the initial like this place is selling minors, and so you send back another team, and then maybe the first team goes back a few days later. You're getting to know as much as you can about these potential victims, these potential
It's
minors,
like
and
reconnaissance, really.
yeah, and then using digital forensics too, open source information, social media accounts, and
Mm.
linking. And we have a ton of technology with the Exodus Road in Colorado Springs and we have experts to run that technology that can take the on-ground intelligence and turn it into a target package that we then take to law enforcement. And what was really great last week in the country I was in, a lot of times it takes law enforcement going back with their undercover agents, which are locals, which raises suspicion when
Mm.
locals go in because they know it might be law enforcement. So a lot of clubs don't allow locals in. But what was great about this particular case that I have to stay quiet about in terms of the location until it comes out publicly was that the National Law Enforcement Agency looked at our footage, looked at the target package that we created along with our team in Colorado Springs that did the online. And I don't think they had to use the dark web in this particular instance, but they have that capability if they need to.
Hmm.
They said what you have looks legit. We're going to get all the appropriate paperwork and we're going to do the raid without having to verify on our own, which that was
Nice.
amazing. And
Yeah.
that speaks to an organization that I get to volunteer for, that I'm proud of this organization that has invested so much time and energy into building that relationship with that particular branch of law enforcement. And
Mm.
we have those types of relationships in every country we operate in uh, at regional and national levels, and both regular cops and counter trafficking cops, um, which is a huge part of it because they're thankful for the support of volunteers like myself that have the training, have the skill set, and have the equipment necessary to do this really challenging work.
Yeah. So you're basically, just again to restate, um, you're uniquely positioned as foreigners, as white American, basically, to kind of go into these bars where ladies underage many times can be bought. And that's kind of something that the local cops can't really do. Like I said, they'll raise suspicion, and you can go in there and gather evidence and then report back and then hopefully save some of these ladies or bring down some of these establishments.
Exactly.
Um, yeah.
And that particular raid resulted in, I thought there might be two or three minors, but there was more than that
Mm.
were rescued, and a few girls that were over the age of 18, and three traffickers being arrested. And that's the goal, because um, not only does that provide a new life for those girls, it takes those traffickers off the street,
Hmm.
and it sends a message to that whole street. And if it hits the news cycle, it makes people reevaluate their choice of career. It drives up the average age. It makes it more difficult and more dangerous to ask about minors for
Mm.
customers. So it de-incentivizes minors. I mean, we were in Phnom Penh. Right next to Phnom Penh, there's a street that was known internationally for trafficking of younger kids, and now there's a school there on
Oh
that,
wow.
you know, where Agape International, where our band makes a lot of our T-shirts and buys a lot of kimonos and stuff from. They not only restored the lives of all those children, took a lot of those traffickers, put them in prison, took a lot of the Johns, put them in prison, but they restored the physical places that
Yeah,
where this street used to be known for this. Now it's known for opportunity. It's known for education. It's
that's
known for
awesome.
employment opportunities for young women.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of it too is aftercare. Which when I was there over in Southeast Asia, I was doing several stories. One was the story I did with you, but then some of them were with aftercare organizations and stuff like that. And one of them was these orphanage Thrive Rescue. I mean, they had kids in there young. I'm talking 6 to 10 years old. That some of them were just coming out of bad family situations, but some of them actually were coming out of trafficking, and
Yeah.
it's terrible. But we had mentioned earlier like that pinned post that you made like I'd say about a year ago
Yeah.
on your social media. Um, since that one's kind of out and kind of done, can you kind of talk to me a little bit about that kind of situation?
Yeah, that was awesome. I'll still be less specific about
Sure.
elections. That was uh, there's a popular street in Asia that's known for sex tourism, um, and on that street, I've been on it recently, and I have one worker at a club that said the work we do here is legal, but it's not legal. And I was like,
Mm.
oh, what do you mean? He's like, well, it's legal, but it's not legal. And I was like, I don't understand. And he's like, this work is human trafficking. He's
Yeah.
actually said those words to me.
Jeez.
And I was like, how, man? You know, I'm pretending to be ignorant about it. He's like, we sell the girls. And what happens is clubs know that there is a premium to sell a minor, and there's also a premium to sell a virgin. And unfortunately, in many parts of the world, there is good luck associated with having sex with a virgin.
Hmm.
Like, and so they can ask a lot of money for that
Right.
exchange, and that's a particularly valuable case for us to work because it can expose and root that out and just like I want people to be like I don't even want to mess with that. Like, I want people to say no, I'm not going to partake in that kind of interaction. And yet we found somebody that was eager to you know sell us the virginity of a girl for like 4 grand equivalent in USD, and to
Which
count
is a
that,
lot of money over there.
yeah, a lot. And they were willing to take risks, and they knew they were taking risks. And so to count that out took a long time.
Mm.
Local bills, you know, and I videotaped the whole interchange. And
Wow.
went in, we had undercover police with us. And as soon as that interchange happened, it's not like you think. It's not like boom. The music's kept on playing for another 3-4 minutes probably.
So
But so
you were the guy, like quote unquote, buying this
yeah,
virgin.
yeah.
Wow. And you count out the money and paid him and everything.
And we had there was about 50 girls and women in the club I was in, um, and then right down the street another club, same things happening, and it's Exodus Road in with law enforcement, the local counter trafficking police, and then you see a little bit of a skirmish, you see some flurrying, and then you see the dudes coming in with whatever the long rifles are, with the ski masks and everything, the
Wow.
SWAT guys, and then everybody kind of gasps.
Yeah.
This really tough woman says, "I'm so and so with such and such a department, and we have suspicion of human trafficking here." And really calmly and confidently, but with a little quaver in her voice, because it's a nervous thing. because she's going up against a corrupt system.
Mm-hmm.
She's going up against international criminal networks, and in that particular raid, an international kingpin was arrested, and
Wow.
it really shook things up there, and it shook things up in law enforcement too. And so, for me, it's a really an honor and a privilege to be part of something that's bringing it. At the very least, we brought to light what's
Yeah.
happening.
Did they have
And
to like pretend to arrest you or anything to like keep?
sadly, no. That's always been my goal.
But like you were, I mean, I remember a couple years ago when we talked. I don't think you had to at that point like been like in the room when like a raid happened, or
Yeah,
and
even
so
right
that's
before,
amazing.
because it's so hard to go over there. I got 2 weeks, and
Yeah.
to get everything, all the stars to align in those 2 weeks. Granted, I did go to Latin America once, and this might have been since we talked. And I love this kind of work where the police knew of several networks of traffickers, but they
Mm-hmm.
just couldn't get, they can't tap
Mm.
WhatsApp. They're trying so hard. We can't crack WhatsApp. Um, and so we had all these techniques to pull the traffickers out of of the safety of, because they're deleting messages, deleting photos that they send
Yeah.
on both sides. On WhatsApp, you can delete on both sides. So we had some techniques that they wanted to set up these sting operations, but they needed Westerners. They call it the gringo effect. And so that was easy work,
Right.
just bought a bunch of alcohol, um, had several parties at several different locations that were our locations that we could control the environment. We can control the Wi-Fi. We can control the
Mm.
CCTV. And then they're coming to us, and that was awesome. And then I'm trying not to give away too much information, but they all got pulled over on the way home, so you can ID everybody. That's an excuse
Mm.
to ID them under a different pretense, right? And so now everybody has to present a real ID to law enforcement.
Mm.
They don't realize that the law enforcement has ulterior motives. Is it
Yeah.
a driving thing? Is it just what is this? And so these cops are smart, man. They're brilliant. And even when we went undercover on that one, the DA came out on one night
Oh no way.
and just drank a couple beers and sat with us. And that what was great about that is some of the female law enforcement agents dressed up pretending to be professional girls,
Yeah.
girls, and were able to interview, without it feeling like an interview, some of the victims
Yeah.
of these traffickers. And for that one, that was great because we set it up, and then they hit all those different networks the same night, and it was the night after I got home, and I still on a thread with all the police. And so I
Mm.
got to see the helicopter. I got to see the traffickers' homes that I'd been in just recently, the gates getting smashed down and the SWAT rushing in, and
Wow.
it's happening. I got to see all the footage and the videos of that, and the photos of these guys and gals that were trafficking a lot of vulnerable refugees, honestly, from Venezuela, were being coerced into this work.
Mm. Yeah. I remember like after the night that we went out, it was like the one of the weirdest like mix of emotions I've ever had
Yeah,
because it was kind of this like euphoria excitement that like we kind of just did something and
yeah,
like it was quote unquote successful. Like I said, we were just really mainly telling the story. We weren't really like doing what you normally do, but it was, but at the same time, it was heartbreaking.
yeah,
And it was like this just really weird mix of emotions. Cause I remember one place we were in, I remember seeing a girl, I know she had to be no older than 14. And like, and like the mama san was like trying to like encourage her, but also kind of force her to come talk to us. And like,
yeah,
you could tell she didn't want to come talk to us. And
yeah,
they were kind of pushing her towards us. And then the last place we went, we were playing Connect Four with the girls and stuff, and I was sitting there, and I was just trying to talk to her, and she actually spoke pretty good English, and she had a necklace on, a cross necklace, and
hmm,
she like reached in and grabbed it and looked at it and like asked me about it, and I kind of was like talking about Jesus and stuff, but I was just like, it was just terrible because I was like, I'm pretending to be this like seedy dude who might want to buy her, but then I'm wearing this cross necklace, and I wanted to just like, I don't know, do something, but there's nothing I could really do, and it was just this weird emotion of just it was just sad, man.
Yeah, getting over that sense of helplessness, um, uh, and having fear, um, and sorrow heightened simultaneously with overstimulation of the music being loud,
Mm-hmm.
smoke, the alcohol, so a lot of times the drugs, the cocaine and the ecstasy, like synthetic ecstasy, like sniffing stuff in Latin America, all that's there. And then the sexualized atmosphere and the weirdness
Mm-hmm.
of it reminds you of like some of the outfits that like cheerleaders wear back home sometimes, and the sorrow of a child being stuck in this and looking over and seeing a 250, 300 pound old guy sitting with a 16-year-old girl.
Yeah, it's
And
gross.
you're taking all that in, and yet you're scared of being, you're scared of being found out with a camera, like someone sitting
Yeah.
next to you, realizing your pocket is hot, you know, like for you, which I was like, oh man, I I remember that moment. I was like, why did I let him do this? But uh, I don't. Most of the time, I don't. The sorrow factor I've been able to push back because I have a mission to do. I have
Mm-hmm.
something to accomplish, and so it's important for me to write songs to
Mm-hmm.
deal with all those emotions and all that sadness, and then also to have phrases in her language that when I say goodbye to her, I know what I mean by the phrase.
Mm.
You know, and it might be something as similar in Thailand. It's like soy ma ma, which I'm sure she hears all the time, but something along the lines of "You're so beautiful, soy ma ma." Um, but by that, I'm giving her a blessing in the only way I know how to, without being weird, without being creepy, without being
Yeah.
overly spiritual. I am speaking worth and value into this girl that I probably am not going to impact her life in any way, other than that short time that I treated her with dignity and respect in the midst of this awful environment that she's so used to being in. And maybe in another life, I'll see her again and she'll get to know that I was there for something other than what it looked like I was there
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. It's that was just a crazy experience, man. Have you ever experienced any spiritual warfare in this kind of work, or had any like just kind of weird experiences in these kind of dark places?
I don't know. I don't. I'm a little bit of a doubting Thomas in some regard to some of that stuff, and yet that was a big topic on this last trip with a lot of my buddies that were working alongside me. Because I'm a skeptic when it comes to some of that aspect of things. Although a lot of people that I really respect have been around that. I wonder all the way back to what happened to Jason Russell from Coney 2012, the video from Invisible Children. Did Joseph Coney, the warlord, trafficking children? Was he able to attach something to Jason that affected his mental health? And I don't look at it like there's like these dark entities in these places. Like I don't view these places that way. Like, and I think that the true darkness is the apathy
Hmm.
that so many of us are able to have towards these humanitarian crises from
Yeah.
our castles, our insulated castles of comfort, and our idolatry of safety, our idolatry of security, um, and how we insulate ourselves. I think that's to use the word maybe metaphorically. I think that's demonic.
Mm.
What the And so I'm dodging your question because I without offending anybody, I don't really see that. I don't see that in these girls. Like, I think lust is similar to greed. If there are demonic forces in these brothels that we're in, then there's demonic forces in the powers in the United States, specifically in church going people that attend church buildings that defend lust and greed and the grab for wealth at the highest order in individuals that are promoted and defended and given all sorts of leeway because they say it like it is. That's equally demonic in my mind
For
and
sure.
something to root out of our culture.
Yeah.
So if you asked this last trip I was on, there was an Assemblies of God pastor, and he's going to answer your question way differently.
Sure.
There was, a military guy. There's a guy that works on windmills that's Catholic. And they were all talking about exorcism and stuff like that. But for me, the darkness is very literal. It's very real. It's very
For sure.
tangible. It's
Yeah.
it's people that want what they want, and they're willing to take advantage of someone else's poverty to get it. I think
Yeah.
that's dark. That's dark enough for me.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, those things hide. It's not like you walk into a brothel and there's just like a demon standing there. It's
Um,
like, it's going to be under the surface and stuff like that. But um, does the Exodus Road do? Are they mainly internationally focused? Like, have you done? Do they do anything stateside? Because I know trafficking in the U.S. looks quite a bit different than it does in a lot of these places, but it's still very real.
yeah, it's very real. And we are working here in the United States. We barely can talk about it.
Hmm.
But a big part that we can talk about is our cyber forensics teams. And what I talked about with the open source, working alongside law enforcement with open source. And we got technology that is really, really cool, that can do really remarkable things, scary things that civilians have access to this kind of technology.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what non-civilians have access to. Like, it's really incredible what we can use technology for good on. And it looks different. And I think the best, to stay controversial with you, I think the clearest example when people wonder that's not trafficking. That's just prostitution. That's just some girl
Right.
selling herself online. Um, Andrew Tate's website, which he took down this part of it, he explains in his personal actions what sex trafficking looks like in the United States very, very clearly. And the kind of sex trafficking that he claims that he participated in would be kind of the Romeo idea, the boyfriend. So he talks about how he would get romantically involved with girls for the sake of exploiting them online,
Yeah.
pretending that he's interested in them romantically. And that would be, I think, fraud and coercion. So trafficking is fraud, force, or coercion with selling someone for sexual services. And that's exactly what Andrew Tate did. So all those guys defending him, it's like, in his own words, he says, by definition, I got rich off of sex trafficking girls.
Yeah, that's like it's very much like how do I say it? It's more like subtle, I guess. Not always, but in like the way it works here. I read a book like right kind of before we kind of met up that
Yeah.
like really underscored how it works for me because like you said, yeah, like a lot of people see a girl, a prostitute or whatever, and they're like, oh, it's just that's her fault. She's a prostitute or whatever. And sometimes maybe or whatever, but what happens a lot of times, like you said, is an older guy, very intentionally and knowing exactly what he's doing, will basically get a younger, very impressionable, usually from a broken home, poor girl to like fall in love with him, buy her stuff, treat her like a princess, da da da, and then a month or two into it, when she's completely isolated, left whatever family she had, has no money, has nothing but him. Maybe he's got her on drugs. Then he, invites three guys over and they take advantage of her, and then they lock her in a closet for like a week or something, and then it's very different. It's insidious. It's like subtle, but it's also very intentional in how they do it, and it's scary. It's crazy, man.
It's scary that it happens. And it's really scary that someone like Andrew Tate is out there influencing our sons
Yeah,
under the guise of like all the other talking points about masculinity, blah, 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 blah. He is teaching our boys how to be awful human beings.
Mm.
And he has the defense of so many like notable figures in Christianity and
Yeah.
in certain corners of political mindset. Like it's really annoying to me, because he pretty much lays it out. Just like I think there's a book called the Bible of Pimpology or something like that, that
Oh yeah, yeah.
it lays out what. And we're fragile. We're fragile. And I always wondered why 18 years old was such a, you know, such a number. But now that I have teenagers, now that I have a 15-year-old girl, I have a 17-year-old boy, I have a 12-year-old daughter. Now I understand how impressionable we
Oh
are,
yeah.
age in particular, and how we're just looking for any sort of validation,
Hmm.
sort of love. And yeah,
Especially when you come from a home where like, your parents didn't care about you, and like you're like literally seeking for anyone to latch on that seems like they're giving you love and material stuff and attention, and these girls they'll just leave with these guys and then not know what they're walking into.
I think Adam Kusher's Thorn helps a lot with that kind of thing, because traffickers know how to target vulnerable
Hmm.
on social media, and our kids are stepping into a world as digital natives, where you and I are digital pioneers. Um, where I mean, we're the Exodus Road has an amazing program that I've been presenting uh, about online safety for kids, and we find out that we're really wired for five close people
Hmm.
in our interactions, 15 uh, good friends, 5 best friends, that includes family, 15, and then kind of 50 is a healthy mark for acquaintances in a typical time span. But our kids are dealing with hundreds
Hmm.
a day, of people that, and it's changing the way we are as humans. Um, and we need to recognize how vulnerable they are, and how different, online social interactions are way different for my kids than they are for me. Just a
Yeah.
simple text is different for my kids than it is for me.
Hmm.
Um, and so I want to look out for them, not by dissing them, because I think teenagers right now are some of the coolest, most interesting people ever. They are very cool, and they are very smart, and they're very interesting. Um, and their common sense is different than our common sense.
Hmm.
Just recognizing that, because they're like, why does it take you so long, Dad, just to mute the commercial? Just hit that one button. Why do you have to look so long every time? Which is me saying to them, hey, when I said start the laundry, change the laundry out. I, take it from the washer to the dryer. They're, well, you didn't say start the dryer. Well, it's kind of assumed, like that's a, uh, but realizing how vulnerable they are, and how much they need people in their lives, not to judge them, not to talk down to them, or make fun of them, but to come alongside them, and also to be tender. They need,
Yeah.
this obsession with being tough and manly. um I don't think it's helpful. I don't think it's helpful. And you're talking to a guy that just roofed his house with his kids, that is trying to. I've never been a mechanic my whole life. I'm taking out steering consoles with my son, just trying to figure stuff out. But I'm also, a poet, and I'm a musician,
Yeah.
and I cry a lot in film, when I'm watching. uh, so I'm not an expert. I'm trying to figure out things with my own kids, but realizing how vulnerable they are, and not pointing the finger at them, not pushing them away. And we push so many kids away. The most vulnerable of the most vulnerable are yelled at on social media by the moral church going crowd,
Yeah.
and it's doing irreparable damage,
Hmm.
and it makes me sad.
Yeah, man. It's good to hear you say like that teenagers are cool and like interesting, because I feel like everyone wants to hate on the younger generation. Um,
We were there, man.
yeah,
I don't know if you're ex or whatever. We were cool too,
I'm a millennial, man.
watching Stranger Things, man. I'm like, man, we were such a cool group in the 80s. And then the
Yeah,
millennials were cool. People always diss the millennials. My wife's a millennial.
yeah,
Millennials are cool, and these kids are cool.
yeah, yeah.
So
There's
boomers, man, boomers were cool too, but what have they become? I'm kidding.
well, we're coming up on an hour, a little over an hour here, so to try to wrap it up into a little bit of a bow here. One of the things you kind of mentioned it earlier, and one thing that really drew me to your message and your mission when I first kind of found out about you, and it's one of your lyrics, I think, one of your songs. It's also obviously in the Bible, but you talk about bringing your loaves and fish,
Hmm.
right? Like just humbly doing what small thing you can. And some people probably think I'm crazy and just like talking about conspiracy theory stuff, and maybe I am a little bit. But also, I see some of it as trying to use my tiny platform for good. And I don't want to go too far off into it, but I also want to, spread the gospel and talk about Jesus. And that's always been part of the podcast. So I see that as kind of one of my loaves per se. So, but just this idea of humbly bringing to the table what you can, knowing that God can multiply, and a lot of it comes from your intention and your heart and what you're doing. And so I don't know. I guess what would be like your encouragement or your advice for folks, as far as how they can do good in the world? Not everybody has the means or opportunity to go undercover into a brothel in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, like we did, um, or whatever. But I don't know. What would you say to those folks that might be hearing this and say, I want to do something?
Some people do have the capacity and the time to sign up on the Exodus Roads Delta team and invest, 4 or 5 grand a year to go over for 2 weeks, give your vacation time, get
Mm-hmm.
trained. And there's been 5 individuals so far that have been recruited at Remedy Drive shows to do exactly that.
Nice.
They have that currency. They might have a particular set of skills already. They might not. That's an option. Or you have a podcast. That's your currency. You're using the currency of your podcast at the pulpit of your digital congregation to shine a light on freedom and hope and justice. Just like I do with the currency I have. I have my microphone. I have my songwriting ability. That's
Mm-hmm.
my particular set of skills. I'm using that. That's my currency. And we all have a
My
currency.
microphone and my music. This voice I own, I'm going to use it.
Got it, baby. That's
That's
my
you.
lyric. Um, and I am always amazed I like keeping it broad and wide open because I'm amazed at the things that I'm finding out about. There's some longtime fans of Remedy Drive, our band, that just instead of getting toasters and high thread count sheets and towels for their wedding, they put 9 grand. Their community put 9 grand to the front line of rescues.
Oh,
The
wow.
Exodus Road has a $20 a month, like send, buy a couple drinks for an investigator. I like that, the ring of that,
Yeah.
like do that, buy one of my friends, like pay for all the drinks for a night, pay $20 for one club's drinks, and potentially that $20 leads to the freedom and
Mm-hmm.
of some girls and the dismantling of a criminal network. Whatever your currency is, your voice, your time, your art, your youth. If you spend yourself on behalf of the oppressed, says Isaiah the prophet, then your light will rise like the noonday.
Mm.
And we all have a currency. What are you going to spend it on? You might think it's just a tiny podcast or a non-household name rock and roll band, but what is seemingly insignificant to whoever's hearing this is not insignificant. And the only way the world is being changed is through those seemingly insignificant acts of love, those seemingly insignificant acts of courage, because this arc of the moral universe, as Dr. King says, as long as it is, it's bending towards justice. And you can throw the weight that you have and pull it down alongside me and Hunter and everybody else that is keeping on chipping away, tearing a little corner off the darkness. So that's my challenge for you. At the very least, join the Exodus Road, with $20 a month, or sharing stories of the raids that are successful. Whatever your currency is, join
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, man. That's so good. And, if people are listening, where can people go to support, find out more about Exodus Road and support it, and also find out about your music and that kind of stuff, what you got going on?
Go to remedydrive.com, and then you'll see the tabs there. You can listen to music. You can read about the Exodus Road. You can get involved. There's a number to text there that's long, so I won't say it, but you'll get updates if you text that number whenever a raid is announced, a successful raid is announced, which is cool.
Yeah. And my favorite album is North Star. I think it's a really good album, so I recommend people check it out. But yeah, man, thanks for your time, dude. This has been really cool. Maybe we can get back on sometime and just do a whole show about Nephilim and stuff.
Yeah, I would do that in a heartbeat. Like,
But I don't know. You're just gonna debunk all my theories the whole time?
well, I wasn't debunking. I'm just
No,
giving
no. You're more balanced than I am.
cautionary. Like, okay, let's make sure to.
No, you need balance for sure.
But I love going deep. My guys on this last trip, when I was talking about cows being beamed up to and taken to the backside of the moon, they were that's where I lost them. So I can go deep if you want me to.
Oh, dude, I've been. Have you heard of? You've heard of missing 411, right?
Uh-uh.
Oh my gosh. Okay, missing 411. It's this phenomenon all across the world, and but like a lot of times in like national parks or like Mount Shasta is a big one, Yellowstone, but all over the place. Like people will just like usually a lot of times it's hunters just
Yeah,
vanish.
yeah, I know about that happening. I didn't
And
know.
like sometimes they'll be like folded, their clothing will be like folded on like a tree stump and they're just gone.
Yeah,
And anyway, so there's a new one, not new, but it's called Missing 411 The Hunted. It's all about hunters, and one of the stories is a guy, he like claims that he saw a a UFO abducting elk to like do experiments on them and stuff. But anyway, it's just
or not. Maybe not to do experiments. Maybe
eat
to
them.
build flesh suits that are android vessels for the kind of entities that Jesus threw into the pigs from Legion that actually pilot spacecraft.
Okay, so you think you're in the alien is a meat suit for demons camp?
And by demon, I mean the disembodied
Disembodied spirits of the Nephilim.
of the Nephilim's offspring that don't
Right.
have any place. So that they said to Jesus, "Wait a second, I thought we had this agreement, and that agreement they're speaking of is in the Book of Enoch."
Mm-hmm.
Um, now
That's a
that
whole
I
other podcast.
reestablished some credibility, I'm throwing it all the way here, but I would love to talk with you about that at some point.
No, I think if people are still listening to my podcast,
They're
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 already
with it. All right.
yeah. I weeded out the skeptics a while ago, maybe, but no. But this has been great, man. Let's try to stay in touch better, man, because
Yeah,
it's been good talking to you again.
you too.
All right, man. Thanks again, and we'll be in touch.
All right.
All right, man. Thanks.